What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Dark Ether Files podcast. I'm Special Agent Spooky Clutter,
I'm Special Agent Daner Bobaner.
and today we're going to be doing something a little different, something that we don't usually do, or if we have done something like this, it's mainly been in live streams because it's it's a lot easier that way. Because
Hmm.
it's it's our usual movie watches or war and pop culture, and then we start talking about films. But today it's going to be its own little video. And today we're going to do a spoiler discussion for Godzilla Minus One. So if you haven't watched Godzilla Minus One, first of all, go watch it. Second of all, you might want to leave this video and come back after you've watched the film. Because we're going to be diving into
Good
some
call.
spoilers, giving some general thoughts, opinions, things of that nature, and see where this conversation takes us. So first and foremost, I want to get this out of the way because Danner has informed me that he's more of a Godzilla casual fan. He's not like me in the sense where I've been following this franchise since I was in diapers. But
Not quite.
Godzilla, yeah. But Godzilla is one of these franchises that is part of my DNA in the sense that it's one of the few franchises that I consistently watched growing up. The other two were Star Wars and Predator. Just off the top of my head, Star Wars, Predator, Godzilla. Those were three franchises that I constantly indulged myself in and still enjoy to this day. And being that the MonsterVerse it's been decent. It reminds me of the late '60s, early '70s era of Godzilla films, which is also known as the Showa era of Godzilla films. It was more campy, over the top. Godzilla Minus One was a very welcome return to the more dark and gritty seriousness of the franchise. Um, I would say that Minus One it's a lot closer to the 1954 film than anything else that has been produced, even by Toho themselves. I mean, the atmosphere, the sort of post World War II tension that okay, yeah, the war is over, but in the case for the Japanese, they just got nuked by America, and they're trying to pick up the pieces of their lives, you know, and then all of a sudden now you have this introduction of Godzilla, which just makes things worse. Which is why I believe it's called Minus One, because when Japan got nuked, they got brought down to zero. It's like they're at the bottom of the barrel. Then Godzilla comes in and just breaks the barrel. So now we're in Minus One. I think it's kind of clever. The
hmm
the title of the movie.
Well, yeah. I mean, even as a casual dummy like myself, even when you're talking about how it feels like it's goes back to the roots of that old '54 film. Like even I knew, like during certain scenes, when that music started playing, it's like that's the classic theme. Even I knew that. But and you're talking about your introduction to Godzilla. Like for me, you're talking about when you were in diapers. Shockingly, my introduction to Godzilla was probably when you were in diapers because my introduction to Godzilla, unfortunately, well, maybe not unfortunately, it was the Saturday morning cartoon, which was a pseudo sequel to, well, the 1998 film, which
Hmm.
I'll admit, it's not great, but for what it is, it's decent.
Well, I'll
It's
say
just it's
this.
dumb Saturday morning fun, kind of on par with like what you'd watch in the '90s.
Well, I'll say this: the animated series was actually more faithful to the Godzilla franchise than the movie itself, because in the in the series you had Godzilla using the atomic breath, the actual atomic
Yeah,
breath, where it was a color green and he was breathing it like a dragon, like Godzilla we know, compared to the actual film, which he just sort of breathed fire
or
or gas.
or a
It was kind of
side, just
yeah, kind of left to interpretation as far as what the hell that even was. But the other reason why that animated series reminds me of the classic Godzilla films is because it had an alien plot, which was very reminiscent of Destroy All Monsters, which was a culmination of a certain period of time for Godzilla films that introduced several characters. The thing about the Godzilla franchise and all the monsters you see is that Toho branched out. Like, there wasn't just Godzilla films. There were other films like War of the Gargantuans, which featured giant Bigfoot creatures created by Dr. Frankenstein. Yeah, that was a thing. You had Frankenstein Conquers the World, where you had a creature called Baragon, which would later return in Godzilla uh, Giant Monsters All Out Attack in 2001. So the point is that Toho and Godzilla and the monsters surrounding Toho and Godzilla have been around for a very long time. For example, Rodan and Mothra, they had their own films. And then you had the sort of crossover event where it was Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, which introduced King Ghidorah and an alien plot. And it showed Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan teaming up to take on Ghidorah. And then you had a sequel, which was called Invasion of the Astro Monsters, which basically left out Mothra. But the whole thing is still there, where it's a big monster verse, like what Legendary is doing. But getting back to Minus One, it goes back to its roots. And I don't mean that in some superficial, catchphrasey kind of way. I mean it because this movie does not have another monster. Godzilla is the only creature in this film, and he is the primary antagonist. Now,
well, what makes him a monster is not just him being this big destructive force of nature. It's also what he represents. Like, what Godzilla as a whole has been an allegory for since the beginning, but they added another layer of it to this movie and to the story, which, of course, this is a spoiler discussion, so it's really about our main character. I can't say the names because, fuck, I can't speak Japanese.
okay.
I can't pronounce it correctly.
I can name off the main character, Koichi. I don't remember. I don't remember the other characters' names, unfortunately. But yeah, Koichi is our main lead.
Yeah, and essentially, what Godzilla is in this movie is kind of like an allegory of some sorts, the embodiment of his survivor's guilt. Like, this guy is a kamikaze pilot, which is basically you go to die, and you die with honor. And he didn't do that because, well, he's a coward, simply put. I mean, yeah, I understand where he's coming from. I mean, especially with that opening scene where, he's Godzilla, he comes in, and at first, I was a little off put at first because, like, Godzilla's kind of small here, isn't he?
Yeah,
like
that kind of threw me off.
Like 2-3 stories big or something.
Well, you see, I'll say this: it might have been a good idea to watch the original 54 film and then watch this one, because Godzilla Minus One is sort of a soft remake of the 54 film, because it follows some of the similar beats where you have Godzilla that's sort of, looming around this small island, which was Bikini Atoll. Now, in the original 54 film, the island where you had natives on there, I mean, they weren't natives like in King Kong. They were just native people that were there. They were fishermen. The island was called Odo Island, and they had a legend about Godzilla, a creature that, was from the bottom of the sea, and he would come up and, walk on shore and sort of like torment the locals in a way. And that's sort of what happens here. But in the original 54 film, first off, the film takes place in 54. So this is 9 years removed from World War II. And it's explained in that film that Godzilla was an ancient dinosaur-like creature that was mutated by the nuclear testing going on post-World War II. And this time we get to see that. So this movie serves as a sort of origin story, too, where we actually get to see where Bikini Atoll, which was a very famous island that they did nuclear testing on, where they dropped the bombs. And this time Godzilla was there, and we get to see him start to mutate. And that we haven't really seen that. I say that because in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah from the 90s, you sort of get this subplot where you get to see a prehistoric Godzilla before he was Godzilla, which is very similar to this movie. But in that movie, he looked more like a miniature T Rex, and they called him a Godzillasaurus. It was weird, but it was explained that that dinosaur was infected with the radiation from the nuclear test, and he became Godzilla. But this film actually goes out of its way to show us just a brief little glimpse too, and that's kind of important because it sort of it leaves up to the imagination to wonder, okay, you're seeing a brief transformation scene where you've seen Godzilla pre radioactivity. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd say he's about the size of the T Rex from Jurassic Park, roughly.
Oh yeah.
And then we get to see a brief glimpse of the transformation scene, and this is where he gets bigger. And I wasn't the only one. I was thrown off, and I think Carter was too when we saw it that, damn, Godzilla's pretty small. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, then the radiation hits and he's bigger. It was good though. I mean,
Oh
that
yeah.
whole scene where, Godzilla's attacking the small camp. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that was intense. Like, I in recent memory, as far as I know, we hadn't really seen Godzilla behave in that manner. Like,
No.
Godzilla has stepped on people. That we've seen that before. But to actually deliberately chomp down on someone and just like throw them around on for humans. He hasn't done that with humans. He's done that with other monsters for sure, but humans no. So it kind of delved into that more horror aspect, like one of those creature features. But it was still pretty intense.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I didn't expect it to get that violent either. I mean,
Yeah.
just fucking throwing these people around like fucking rag dolls and shit.
Yeah.
And of course, like when guy is unconscious and then comes to, and then yeah, they're all dead because of you.
Yeah.
And I think what, like with that layer of what I was talking about of what Godzilla represents for a character is his survivor's guilt. And
Mhm.
the worse he feels, it's like the bigger Godzilla gets. So it's kind of blending together. It doesn't need to tell you this, but you see it for yourself. Good old fashioned visual storytelling. Don't club the audience over the head with exposition dumps because we're getting it as the story progresses again, just from what we're seeing, not what we're
Yeah.
being told.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Koichi's story is it's interesting. Like
Oh, absolutely.
I wasn't expecting a character story like this in minus one. Like
No.
I assumed it was going to be another Godzilla movie. I mean, that's fine. I don't mind another Godzilla movie like the MonsterVerse stuff. With that said, now that I've indulged in minus one, it makes me irritated. Like I was irritated in the 2014 film when Bryan Cranston's character was wasted because
Yeah.
he was the strongest aspect and he was the closest we would get in the MonsterVerse to Koichi in a way.
Hmm.
I say in a way because Dr. Serizawa, even though he's very limited, the really his presence in the MonsterVerse is more so like a nod to fans because the Dr. Serizawa in the 54 film, I mean, you want to talk about a really good story. I mean, Godzilla Minus One rivals the original film. With that said, I like certain aspects of the 54 film better, particularly with Dr. Serizawa, because he was a scientist that had created a very powerful new weapon. And he had a sort of guilt himself on whether he lets Godzilla essentially destroy Japan or unleashes this new terrible weapon to the world. And that weapon being the oxygen destroyer. And this is a nice little interesting bit that minus one does not have the oxygen destroyer. They don't defeat Godzilla by a mad scientist sort of means. And it was really interesting how they handled it because what we've seen of the franchise, there's a handful of ways that you can defeat Godzilla. And most of the time, none of those ways include the military because what it shows is the military, even in this film, is that they
Oh
are
yeah.
incapable of defeating Godzilla. He's this embodiment of terror and menace and sort of punishment. And the only ways you could really defeat Godzilla are through an extreme manner like the Oxygen Destroyer or through another monster, which is why I was kind of concerned. Like, I watched one trailer for Minus One, and then I was hearing some blurbs here and there about, what's going on in the other trailers. And we never saw another monster. And of course, ultimately, there is no other monster in the Godzilla in this film, other than Godzilla himself. So you sort of had to find a way. Okay, so we're going back to the basics of just one monster being Godzilla. How are we going to handle defeating him? And of course, ultimately, in the end, they do defeat him, but he's still alive. And this is an interesting aspect. His healing factor. He straight up, he has a Wolverine healing factor for all intents and purposes. The only time we have seen that kind of regeneration is in Giant Monsters All Out Attack, where Godzilla in that film is the embodiment of all the lost and tortured souls of World War II. It's a very weird subplot. Well, not really a subplot, but because it's a main plot for Godzilla. But that particular plot point was interesting because ultimately they defeat Godzilla with the help of other monsters. And in the end, you think Godzilla's dead, but then it goes into the bottom of the ocean where the climax is, and it zooms in on Godzilla's heart, and it starts beating. And then you play the Godzilla theme. And that's basically what happened here. So they've taken elements from all the films across the franchise in some form or fashion and put it into this film. Now, based on the success that this film is getting, I've been hearing rumors that they're going to continue with their own Godzilla universe with this Godzilla. Now, obviously, that was a no-brainer because we see that Godzilla is still alive. Now, they could have just left that as a cliffhanger and that, it's not going to get resolved. But they might be going for it. And I hope they do. Because this film...
We need it.
Yes. Like, I'm excited. I should say my excitement is tamed for this new Godzilla X Kong movie. Mainly because, first and foremost, don't go into that film expecting -1. I don't think anybody is. I think it's the exact opposite, where people are actually shitting on this new Godzilla movie coming out. And my only response to that is don't. Okay, people are saying that Godzilla in this new film looks shitty, the CGI looks bad, or looks too cartoony. When you see Godzilla and Kong running side by side, people are saying, "Oh, that looks really cartoony and cheesy." It's like, clearly you weren't there for the 70s, where Godzilla literally uses his atomic breath to fly backwards.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's this whole MCU era that we're in, and people are saying it looks too Marvelized, shall we say?
Maybe.
I mean, I can at least understand that. I mean, don't be a dick about it, obviously, but for me, it's just kind of like, whatever. Like, I don't expect greatness from these legendary movies. I just expect just enough entertainment value for me to just shove popcorn in my face and just say, "Oh, that was fun." But even where these movies have been suffering and where -1 is a breath of fresh air as well, like we kind of stated, is that the lack of human characters, or at least interesting ones, that don't ground the story in reality enough for us to get invested. Like, again, with Bryan Cranston in that 2014 movie, yeah, he was the most interesting. And it's not just because this was the first thing he's done since Breaking Bad. He was genuinely the best character. Like, that moment where he had to shut that door, that was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And we get great moments like that in this movie as well. Like when our lead, I'm sorry, I'm never going to have to get the name right. I'm never going to get his name right. Because he quite literally accidentally, or was it just an act of fate, forms his own little unofficial nuclear family, if you will. Like with the woman and the child. Because, they're not actually related, but the chemistry is there, and they're there for each other. Like, even between those two, it's like they don't really go full on with the romance, but you know that they care deeply for one another. And of course, with the little girl growing up, when she calls him daddy, like, I gotta tell you that.
Yeah.
I mean, even though he said, "I'm not your daddy," and with his crewmates, who were also great characters as well, like they were nice companion pieces for him as well,
Yeah.
and they all bounced off each other so fucking well too. I mean, you got the smart one, you got the sort of tough one, and you got the funny one. I mean,
Right.
it might seem they're not really thin archetypes either, because there's so much more to them than that. Then they lend themselves to the story in such a unique way. I mean, especially with the funny guy who is like, "Come on, I really want to help." No, 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 no. But then when
Yeah.
he does come to help at the end, and it feels like a genuine triumphant moment. Like, just the way how they're all there for each other in this post World War era is what helped make it so interesting, because, like people said, one of the biggest criticisms about the 2014 movie was not enough interesting characters, not enough Godzilla.
Yeah.
But here we're getting minimal Godzilla, where seeing him is exciting, less is more.
Mm-hmm.
But we got human characters that we find ourselves heavily invested in, and we really want to root for these characters. And you fear for them when they're in danger. Like that fucking Jaws scene. We need to talk about the Jaws scene.
Talk about needing a bigger boat. But then again, they did get a bigger boat. And
Oh,
even then,
they
it
sure
wasn't
did.
enough. Like,
No. Like,
I let
I,
me put it to you this way.
yeah.
When Godzilla takes a shit ton of damage from those cannons on that ship and he sinks down to the bottom, and then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you see the water start to glow blue. I mean, that was I mean, you're a Godzilla fan, you know exactly what's coming next. And the I mean, the atomic breaths. I mean, we'll talk about that other scene later, but um seeing Godzilla's atomic breath and actually having it leave like a quasi miniature mushroom cloud
Mm-hmm.
like twice, I think. And then seeing
Yeah.
Godzilla rise out of the water within the sort of ashes of the ship. Now, we saw that aspect in Godzilla versus Kong, where he did
Mm-hmm.
that, where after he decimated the fleet of ships, you saw him emerge from the water with all the fire surrounding him, and then he, sort of turns around and dives underwater. So Minus One took that really cool shot and used it for themselves. This one, it looked better, personally. Um, it was a lot more effective too, because what it's doing is you're seeing all this destruction from the perspective of the protagonists,
Mm-hmm.
and you actually care more because you realize, holy shit, this thing is big, it's dangerous. How are we going to defeat it? Without another monster, how could you defeat it? And ultimately, of course, they don't in the end. With that said, you still appreciate the fact that this group of people that come together to defeat Godzilla, they're the sort of underdogs.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and when you have a good supporting cast and a good main lead with his own, plot going, that really affects the rest of the story. Because if you take out his aspect of the story, the movie wouldn't work as well,
No. No.
because ultimately it's him that helps in defeating Godzilla, at least for the time. He encounters Godzilla on Bikini Atoll, and with the survivor's guilt. But I think what was really nice about that scene was that the other guy, the other pilot, or the crew
The
guy, that's
mechanic.
the mechanic. Thank you. That he told Koichi about the ejector seat, because it's like, yeah, he didn't die with honor. Koichi did not do the kamikaze run. He didn't die with honor. But then the film also says, maybe that wasn't such a good idea, right? Like, okay, if someone is choosing to die for someone they love, that's a noble thing. It's just
Mm-hmm.
at appropriate timing. When is it really appropriate to do something like that? And I would say that Koichi realized, why the hell am I going to be a kamikaze pilot for this stupid fucking war? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then the mechanic sort of realizing this after the fact, after a sort of peacetime. That's why he had the ejector seat there. He's like, make sure you pull this ejector seat. And when the mechanic finds out that Koichi survived and he started like tearing up, he was cheering, because he
Hmm.
didn't. I mean, when you saw Koichi's reaction, like, why do you have the ejector seat? And it was a good thing because there was a plot twist in this movie that I didn't see coming. I didn't see it coming. The woman who I can't believe I can't remember her name, but Koichi's girl, his lady.
Hmm.
Okay, she sacrifices herself to save him so that he wouldn't get damaged by Godzilla's atomic breath. The debris that resulted in it. And you
Right.
think she's dead. And now it's just him and his adopted daughter. But then he leaves the adopted daughter with the neighbor lady, and he's going to go kill himself. But then she gets a letter, and it's like he could have died, and the child would have been lost another parent or a parent,
Right.
But like when the baby started crying, after like mommy's not coming back, basically, she started
Hmm.
crying. I started tearing up. Like I'll admit it straight up because that shit hurt.
Yeah.
Seeing her make that sacrifice for Koichi, and then now she's gone. I mean that kid already lost her family before, and now she was going to
Right.
lose it again. That's heavy. That's heavy. It's
Right.
heavy.
That. Yeah. And also leads to a little problem I do have in some way. I mean, I'll admit this is just a small negative I have with the movie. Just how you don't hear, or in this case, with our eyes, because we're reading subtitles, see him telling him about the ejector seat. Even though I'll admit that was a bit predictable. I'll admit that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a bad thing. And of course, what you were just talking about, of course, that more than makes up for the predictability factor. At least for me, it does.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, those hard hitting moments, like this is just a problem I have with modern audiences and the climate we're in with the MCU and how it has really stained our views on films and how we interpret certain scenes. Like, why do people feel the need to laugh at scenes you're not supposed to be laughing at? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like the scene is coming off as unintentionally funny either. Like, this is some heavy shit we are talking about here. We're talking about the loss of maybe not your birth parent, but the one who has been raising you as a parent. Like,
Mm-hmm.
especially given how small this little girl is, like 2, 3, give or take, at least at
Yeah.
that point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like scarred for fucking life. And even at the moment where he has his breakdown after she's gone out in the street, and then you of course get that POV shot, which we see in the trailer, which is just an amazing shot, by the way.
Right.
Like where he's just having a big, like just screaming, like he's lost so much, even though he shouldn't be here. And even when he starts to question his own mortality, right? Like, am I even here? Like, am I dead? Have I gone
Right.
to hell? Is this what it is? Like, all that shit's, and people laugh at that shit. It's like, no,
So
this is not funny.
did you get any people laughing in your theater
I
when
did hear a few chuckles for some of that. It's like, this isn't funny. And I say I blame the MCU, and don't think this is just because like I know we talk about the MCU and the current state it is, of course, but I'm not saying that to shit on the MCU. I'm saying that because I've seen it while watching an MCU movie. We actually talked about this last night, as a matter of fact. I saw it in Spider-Man: No Way Home when Andrew Garfield saves MJ there, and he has a moment of emotion as he reflects on his failure to save Gwen, and this was his redemption. The fact that people laughed at that, and now I'm seeing it in other movies during scenes where that you're supposed to be taking seriously and having a lot of emotional impact to them. It's just, what has it done? Has it desensitized us?
I wouldn't say it's desensitizing because if it was desensitizing, you wouldn't have any real reaction.
But
I'd say that it's
but enough
more of
to the
a.
point where it transcends and becomes humor to them.
I think it's that it's been warped. I think the proper term is that the perception of
Hmm.
certain elements have been warped, where the MCU has had some really great installments and some really heavy hitting character moments, like Civil War, like that whole movie, and with the Winter Soldier and Tony at the end, where Tony's seeing the Winter Soldier kill his parents. But
mainly his mother, though.
Yeah. I mean, but Bucky, like Bucky, he wasn't in control. It wasn't really him. And that whole conflict there, that's fantastic. Then you get, well, I like to use more of the more recent examples. She-Hulk, Captain Marvel, some aspects of Guardians of the Galaxy, especially because I do like Guardians of the Galaxy. It's just certain elements, like, for example, Avengers Infinity War, where you're having like a really deep conversation between Star-Lord and Gamora. And then all of a sudden you have just Drax there eating chips. It's like, it's like Gamora's about to die. And we're fucking laughing at Drax eating chips, and he's going to stand perfectly still and not be seen. It's like, it's kind of cringy. Like, it was funny, but it was also cringy looking back, especially because now you have serious elements that aren't being taken seriously by the audience, even if the production team of these movies does everything in their power to ensure to you this isn't a fucking joke. This is serious, I mean, that irritates me too. Now, fortunately, when we went to go see Minus One, not only were there not many people, but the few people that were in there was no laughing. With that said, there was cheering at the end. Like, we all started clapping. When the credits rolled, we started clapping. And I think that was rightly deserved for this film because it is a disaster movie that has a monster in it, and it has characters you actually care about. I think back to Roland Emmerich's entire catalog of disaster films, including Godzilla 98. When you compare it to this film, I mean, people are saying that this is the best Godzilla film ever made. And I understand why. I mean, I still say, maybe this is just me being a purist, but the 54 film, it's just that legendary. The soundtrack with Godzilla's roar. But that said, Minus One is a very close second. Like, yeah, this is my second favorite Godzilla film. Now, if I were to recommend other Godzilla films in the franchise that are close to the 54 film and even Minus One, particularly for character development, I would recommend Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla from 2002 because we have a character that has her own sort of survivor's guilt. It's a pretty good one, and especially with it being a more recent film compared to the other ones, in the sense that it's a lot more modern. It has better special effects and miniatures and things like that. But my sort of top three, just off the top of my head: Godzilla 54, Godzilla Minus One, and then Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla. That's just me. Now, we will be getting into that next year around March with Backtrack Cinema. We're doing a collaboration for Godzilla content. He'll be doing Godzilla reviews on his channel, and we'll be doing Godzilla watch-alongs here. But Minus One is, like you said earlier, Danner, a breath of fresh air. 2023 has been very shitty for film.
Well, yeah, to say the fucking least. I mean, this is one that slipped through the cracks, and while some are calling this their favorite of the year, for me, it's just falling short to number 2 at least. I mean, I still got a soft spot for a retired hitman, or trying to be a retired hitman who wanted to avenge his dog, and it just took him on a big slippery slope. I mean, I got a soft spot for that, but trust me, this one came close. And hey, you got Japan shit going on in that movie as well, so
yeah.
But
I mean,
but yeah, with this one just coming out in this time where Disney has been laying down flop after flop, and even with their overinflated budgets, and it still ends up looking like a fucking PlayStation 2 cutscene. We get something that was supposedly $15 million here, and Disney at this point with the MCU, they can't even dream of effects that look this fucking good. Because with Godzilla himself, there's so much attention to detail. Like when you're seeing the fucking spikes on his back just extend as he's firing up, all that. And I said this before, he looks fucking mean as well. Like during that Jaws scene, like I said, the intensity of the scene, the fact that you need a bigger boat, and what they're doing, and he's just looking at him like, why does it seem like Godzilla has an evil fucking grin on his face?
Yeah.
Like he looks so mean.
He
That is
looks
the
pissed.
like like he just wants to fuck these guys up.
Yeah, I think this is one of the scariest incarnations of the character we've got. I'd say the other one would be Shin Godzilla, because just the design of Shin Godzilla it's terrifying enough as it is. Like if you were to compare Shin Godzilla and Minus One Godzilla, Shin Godzilla is a lot more of like a tank, whereas Minus One Godzilla is like an assault vehicle. You know, a lot more nimble in certain aspects. I mean, he's still got his slow moments, but the mobility of Minus One versus Shin Godzilla, but they're both terrifying. Like,
Yeah.
I would still recommend watching Shin Godzilla. The only thing is that it's really slow. Like, it has a lot of slow moments. But the scenes with Godzilla are the highlights of that film because of the sheer destruction. Like, it's on par or a close second to Minus One in certain aspects. I mean, let's talk about Godzilla's atomic breath. I think it, as far as I remember, the only other time we've seen a mushroom cloud get produced as a result of Godzilla's atomic breath is Giant Monsters All Out Attack, where Godzilla fires up, and then off in the distance you see a mushroom cloud. With that said, this film Minus One, it's more intense. I mean, we've never seen Godzilla's spikes, push up before and then compress down to shoot out the fire. I mean, that is unique to Minus One, and it is fantastic to witness. I mean, the atomic breath has not looked this intense since Shin Godzilla. Like, Shin Godzilla's atomic breath was intense. It was very intense. And the way they shot it as well, very intense.
And the sound design too, like especially when you're getting to that moment and that's another thing though, is the stakes here. Like at this particular moment where it seemed like all hope might be lost at this point, and when it seems like they might be screwed, and what you get there, the way it just goes completely fucking silent there. Like I was sitting there like, shit, are they really gonna do this? Are they gonna end this on a really dark as shit note with them losing?
Yeah.
Like it gave me chills, to say the fucking least. But yeah, of course, the sound design for it was a treat for the ears.
Yeah. Godzilla's roar was really cool too. It incorporated elements of the classic roar that we're familiar with, but it had its own version, its own little twist, and
its
it fit
own
well.
identity.
Yeah, it fit really well. But we were talking earlier about the budget. So the director of Minus One came out and said, I wish it was 15 million," implying that it was less. I mean, that's insane because it was already on a purported $15 million budget with effects this good, and you compare it to the MCU schlock.
Yeah.
What we already know what it is, and
love.
I looked at it. I looked at it with Doctor Who as well, and I talked about it briefly last night on our watch along for Home Alone. That they butchered Doctor Who. The special effects look like crap. Some of it looked decent, but the rest of it was just complete BS. Um, and you mentioned something about the love of the franchise, the caring attention to detail. That's something that is missing from most of these projects from mainstream Hollywood. I'd
Oh
say
yeah.
the only ones that really stood out, at least for like classic franchises, would be Ghostbusters Afterlife and Top Gun Maverick. Like those
Mhm.
two, they did some respecting to the source material, which is a good thing because it's very rare that we get it, that we're even getting that these days, and it's just so coincidental or ironic that Doctor Who is now owned by Disney,
Yeah.
and it's almost echoing what happened with Star Wars because you
Mhm.
had the return of these fan favorite characters,
Yeah.
but they get butchered too. Even with
Oh
the showrunner that was responsible for resurrecting the franchise from over 10 plus years of nothing. He comes back and he shits the bed. But
yep.
minus one doesn't do that. If you're able to watch the movie still by the time this video goes out, if it's still playing in theaters, go see it.
Go now.
Please. Because it will not be something you regret.
Mhm.
Even if you're not at all familiar with Godzilla. That's the neat thing about this. You don't
Oh
need to watch any other Godzilla movies to understand what's going on in this film because this film serves as a sort of soft reboot or a new story being told, sort of soft remake of the original 54 film. But you don't need to see any previous films to know what's going on here. This is a fresh new story with brand new characters and a returning character in Godzilla.
mhm.
But go see it.
Yes. Like
See
right
it
now.
if you can see it in IMAX. First of all, I'll be jealous because I wasn't able to see it in IMAX, but I had heard that it was breaking bank in Japan for IMAX tickets.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
I mean, those special effects. Mwah.
Like, and one other thing to bring up, we've been kind of pitting this thing against Hollywood because it's hard not to. Like, when we say that this movie is really putting woke Hollywood in its fucking place, we're not talking about the box office returns per se. We're talking about the quality of the film and the story, not the box office. Like, I don't care how much your stupid Hunger Games fucking made at the box office, which was number one, because yes, box office is important when it comes to like profiting and being able to make more if you can, but that doesn't that doesn't measure the quality of the film. Like, keep in mind, and yes, here I come back again to the MCU, like where people were saying like, oh well, Captain Marvel made over $1 billion when it was sandwiched in between Infinity War and Endgame, two of the most important films of the MCU. The Marvels comes out and it flops harder than a 300-pound land whale jumping off a 10-foot diving board. Man,
Yeah,
did I say 10 feet? I meant 100 feet. Like,
there you go.
and yours shook and nobody felt a thing.
Yeah, you
Nothing
know
of
what?
value was lost.
You know what? That you make a good point because there was a video that I watched, and I can't even remember the YouTuber's name, but he was commenting about people apparently complaining about uh, how Godzilla is pink in the Godzilla versus or Godzilla X Kong trailer, and how people are saying, "Oh, it's a trans Godzilla." Honest, first and foremost, I don't even know who was even saying that. Like, I don't recall, or I mean, look, I'm not on the internet 24/7, so I don't really give a shit one way or the other. With that said, I highly doubt that people were for a serious criticism of the trailer for the movie that, oh, Godzilla is pink, ergo trans Godzilla. I highly doubt that there were people that were taking that seriously. That whoever was saying it was maybe being a jackass about it. That they were intentionally being inflammatory. They weren't being serious because that sounds like a crock of shit.
You
With
might as
that
well just
said,
apply that to the 1998 film where he's quite literally laying eggs.
With that said, you have people like this particular YouTuber who were trying to own one to the nerdrotics of the world or the yellow flashes of the world, the Geeks and Gamers crew or anybody associated with them, that, they're making these shitty thumbnails saying that, Godzilla's beating woke Hollywood, but no, because the box office numbers say otherwise. Now, I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but I'll say it anyway. Context matters.
I knew it.
When you look at a thumbnail, usually the thumbnail is meant to captivate somebody's interest. That you see something really tantalizing, you're going to be prompted to click on it. A good thumbnail will draw in the audience. With that said, when you actually dive into the video, that's where you got to start paying attention. Because when you see people saying that Godzilla is destroying woke Hollywood, it's like you already said, Dan. We're not talking about the numbers per se. We're talking about the mere fact that Godzilla Minus One did not lecture the audience about any kind of social or political issue that's modern day. I mean, being that this movie,
the message,
being that this movie takes place in World War II, you're not going to be seeing that shit anyway, unless you're one of those people that thinks, oh, you know what? If we're going to tell a story about the Norsemen back in the 1300s, yeah, let's make sure that every other person is a non-white character. Fuck historical accuracy. It's just all about the message, the representation.
No.
Minus One doesn't do any of that shit. Minus One doesn't tell any kind of fucking political message.
No.
If you wanna argue any kind of message it pushes, it's the importance and the meaning of family.
Mm-hmm.
Coming together. That you have these three people that are survivors of World War II Japan, with the nukes. And they come together and they build something together to survive.
They build a life together.
They build a life. There you go. If you want to argue about what message is being pushed, it's that. And that's not a bad idea whatsoever. The idea of establishing a good homestead, working to support your family, that's like a universal positive message to put out there. That's the only message it pushes. The rest of it,
not having to go for just one demographic.
Yeah. The rest of it is a great time. So, final thoughts, final words. Me, like we've already said, go watch this movie. Get it when it comes out on Blu-ray. I know I will. Whenever it comes out.
And something else I wanted to say is, since we're in our final thoughts here, is that, like you were saying, this could be like a good step. Like if you were just like not a big fan of Godzilla before, and if you go see this, and it might pique your interest a little bit more. You might be curious enough to see some of the other movies and shit, which I know it might be working for me. So
yeah, I would say that if you wanted to introduce Godzilla to somebody, and I'm speaking specifically to the Godzilla fans who have been with this franchise through their ups and downs, I'd say start with Minus One. Like, usually, here's the word. Whatever Godzilla movies you watch, you always got to start with the first one. The original 1954 film. That's bar none. With that said, I'm making a little annotation to this in that get Godzilla Minus One there first. It's a more modern film. It's something that people can get into a lot easier because I know not a lot of people like watching black and white, but people, at least here in the West, are becoming more used to the reading subtitles just because anime is really popular here now, which I'm glad, by the way. Just as a quick side note, the fact that, another culture, another animation style is popular here, it's fantastic. And it's also hilarious to watch because anime is outperforming Marvel and DC, which is good and bad. It's good because these people are putting out garbage, and you have something that's not garbage that's beating it. And it's bad because, we once were a staple. Marvel and DC, the staple of comic book entertainment. Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk. These characters are mainstays. They are in the fabric of our culture, and they've been relegated to bullshit.
Yep.
So in that aspect, it's good that another culture is coming in like, hey, you know what? You're not satisfied with what's going on here? We got you covered. Come watch Godzilla. Come watch our anime. Read our manga, So the plus side is that there is entertainment out there, as we always say,
Absolutely.
But yeah, -1, guys.
It's a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, 5 out of 5. I did say in my Godzilla video, talking about the film, non-spoiler, that I gave it a 9 out of 10. I think I might be sticking with that, maybe, just because I wish that there was another monster in this film. But with that said, I understand why there wasn't, and for what this film is, it's probably better, just because it might have taken away just a little bit from the main story that was being told here, which was from the perspective of the human protagonists. Still, it's a great time. It is a bit of a tearjerker, for sure. And let me tell you, when the Godzilla theme hits, and I'd say that there was 2 or 3 times when the original theme hit, it was good. It was real good. They were sparing with the original music, which I can appreciate, because it made those moments that much more rich. Fantastic.
And one final thing, when we talk about how it is beating the mainstream Hollywood shit, it also comes from the reception of what people are saying about it and how we're raving about it. Keep that in mind. Reception, whether it be from the so-called professional critics or the audience, whether it be the hardcore fans or the casual fans like myself, the diehards like him, well, we're all saying this. We're roaring into the fucking sky praising this movie. Almost just not quite as loud as Godzilla himself, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
So, with that all being said, we thank you all for watching, listening, and supporting. Stay tuned for more content. I like doing this type of video. For you guys in the comments, if you guys like this sort of style, let us know, because
please do.
I mean, we can do more of these more often, and it can be.
I sure as hell want to.
Yeah, I mean, just talking a particular movie or movie franchise. Either way, let us know. So
please do.
With that being said, thank you all for watching, listening, and supporting. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, fellow investigators, remember that the entertainment
is out
there. I'm Special Agent Spooky Clutter.
I'm Special Agent Carter Sauce.
Special Agent Dr. Richtofen.
And until next time, fellow investigators, remember,
the entertainment
is out there.